You're watching Memorable Entertainment Television. MeTV Tri-State.
Broke the story on local homestead tax credit fiasco. Exposed the Evansville Redevelopment Commission excessive spending habits.
Your community watchdog. CityCountyObserver.com is your online community newspaper dedicated to the progress of Evansville and Vanderburgh County. We're a nonpartisan publication providing insight into political issues and events that shape our community. We are a watchdog for you, the citizen. Check us out online, city-countyobserver.com. That's city-countyobserver.com.
Tri-State Voices, an open discussion with area leaders on issues affecting communities throughout the Tri-State. Now, here's your host, Mike Woods.
Good morning. Welcome to Tri-State Voices. Every week, Tri-State Voices interviews one of our local leaders concerning issues that are important to our community. Today, we're honored to have Kathryn Martin with us today. Kathryn Martin is the Knight Township trustee. She was appointed to that job after the previous Knight Township trustee had to resign and was convicted of stealing. Then she was elected in her own right, winning a landslide election by, I think, about 2 votes. Kathryn, you inherited, by everybody's definition, a terrible mess, and I think most people give you credit for really cleaning up a mess. The previous person was stealing, the township was bankrupt, you weren't even sure how you're going to get fire protection. Mm-hmm. Where do you start? When you walk in a mess like that, where do you even start?
Really, what I did is I called Mary Hart. She's done this for a long, long time, so I knew that I needed to surround myself with people who knew the way it was supposed to be. We started immediately trying to gather all the documentation of all the checks that were written that weren't supposed to be, and all the invoices of things that needed to be paid, and the vendors that are waiting on their money, and then slowly working from there. Now,
there was, of course, a investigation by the prosecutor's office. I guess the State Board of Accounts was involved. Mm-hmm. So you got all these different agencies coming looking at everything, while at the same time, though, you have to run your office.
Right. And at that time, we really didn't know what we were running as far as, the budget. I ended up finding the budget stapled to a grocery store coupon. We really, when we walked in, we knew that we had to continue supporting those in our township by, burying their loved ones and things like that. But we really needed to find out how much money we had or didn't have. Yeah,
as your predecessor had literally used the credit card for the township to buy tickets to concerts and everything else, right?
Right. Tickets to concert, gas, cabs, through the drive-through at restaurants, you name it, it was used on those items.
And you didn't know what bills had been paid, not paid, no. Anything else?
No. I recall the first checks that I had signed were when I walked in that morning after being sworn in, and the chief deputy brought me paychecks, and me assuming that everything was on the up and up and that everything was the way it was supposed to be, went ahead and signed them. Who am I to walk in and withhold people's paychecks? So, of course, hindsight's 20/20, and definitely learned from those experiences, but we're in a much better place now.
Okay. I would like for you to maybe explain to people just exactly what the trustee's office does.
We provide emergency assistance, whether it's burying a loved one when they don't have the funds to pay for it, life-sustaining medications such as insulin or blood pressure medicine. We also help and navigate and guide people to different agencies that may help them when we cannot, keeping people in their homes, keeping their utilities on. We do just about everything there is.
Now, how big of a township is Knight?
We're over 69,000 people in our township. It's 40% of Vanderburgh County's population.
And in terms of all the townships in Indiana, it's one of the biggest ones, isn't it?
The 8th largest out of 1,006.
Okay. And what are your geographical boundaries?
The Warwick County, Vanderburgh County line, the river bottoms to Lynch Road and to 41.
Okay. So it's big both in population and,
Yes.
and physical size. And is all of it in the city, but part of it's in the county, isn't it?
Right. We have some areas that have not been annexed by the city, so those are our Knight Township out areas.
Okay. Now, let's start. One of the first problems you had was the bills to the fire department weren't getting paid.
Right. We had some radio bills that needed to be paid, which we paid. We also, it was the contract with the fire department that the township could not afford to pay.
And at that time, they had a volunteer fire department.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, our volunteer fire department was one of a kind, and you know, I did everything that I possibly could to keep them up and running, but there just was not any way that we can continue to finance them.
And you were especially close to that fire department, weren't you?
I was. I mean, I had a very close relationship with them, and it grew over the years, and I started going to the board meetings, you know, regarding the Knight Township Trustee's office and advocating for the fire department. And when I finally realized that there was really nothing that I could do to save them, I was devastated.
And so then you signed a contract then with the city where the city would provide fire department for the entire township, is that right?
Right, the Knight Township outside the city limits.
Okay. Now before that though, as I understand it, the fire department for the city provided fire protection for the part of your township in the city, and the part of the township outside the city was the volunteer.
Right.
But now it's all the city.
Right.
Okay. So it's kind of unusual, one of those weird things when you've got part of the county it's in the city and part now, part outside, but the whole thing's the city fire department.
Right.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
So there was, what, $120,000 that was owed to the fire department from the township.
Correct. Yeah. We, and Chief Wathen and the board for the fire department all came together and forgave the debt that the township owed the fire department. And with their help, it made it a little bit easier for us to gain back our stability by them forgiving that debt.
Okay. Now, you signed a 4-year contract. That 4 years is about expired.
Correct.
So are you going to plan on basically having the same arrangement with the Evansville Fire Department, or?
It's worked out very well. We are able to go for maximum tax levy, which is all the funds that are produced by Knight Township, and then they stay in Knight Township. So I think that that's definitely something that we should do again.
Okay. Is the fire protection you're getting now as good as it was when you had both the volunteer fire department and the city fire department?
I believe so. I miss my fire department and love my guys, but I believe that Knight Township is in good hands.
Okay. What happened to all the equipment from the volunteer fire department?
That was all owned by the Knight Township Volunteer Fire Department, so the township doesn't have any rights over it or anything. I believe what they did is they sold it and paid off their bills.
Okay, and now it's disbanded.
Yes.
Okay. Does it cost the township more or less or about the same to maintain fire protection now as it did before?
It's the same.
Same cost?
We could never generate the funds that were promised to the volunteer fire department, and therefore there would have been no way to continue using them.
As I understand, your predecessor agreed to an increase to the fire department that was just silly, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Right.
It couldn't be done.
Right. With the annexation on the northern half of our township, we were losing money off the bat anyway. And then with her agreeing to things without looking into them, just dug us even deeper into the hole.
Okay. Now, what's the annual budget of your office?
It's over $600,000.
And how does that break down? Where's the money go?
We've got over $160,000 goes to the city fire department, and then we've also got over $200,000 goes into our direct relief, which is where all of the funding for our programs is.
Okay, and then the rest of it's administrative costs, that sort of thing.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's talk about direct relief. Direct relief, as I understand, that's what people used to call poor relief.
Right.
Okay. That's the emergency stopgap sort of thing, isn't it?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What we do is it's a case-by-case basis. You know, we have our guidelines, but we have the ability to look at the circumstances and to assess and evaluate what's going on in somebody's life that they are in our office needing help. We're the last resort. You know, they have to go to the other agencies, and by the time they get to us, they usually have their bills paid down to a reasonable amount, or we try to continue to work with them to get them paid down to where we can help.
Okay. So suppose somebody comes to your office and they say, and it's really cold outside, I mean it's 20 degrees, and they say, I just got my utilities cut off and I don't know what to do. I don't have any money. What kind of process do you go through?
We have a list of items that they have to bring in, such as picture ID, social security cards, a lease showing that they reside in our township. They have to have applied for food stamps, child support, and we start the process by having them fill out the application and then kind of working with them, okay, well, how much is your bill, to get reconnected, and calling other agencies to get some more assistance to get that bill down to where we help them.
And then sometimes you make sure people have medications.
They're life-sustaining medications, yes. We have those who are pending health insurance, or those who just don't qualify for health insurance and they need their insulin or their heart medication. They come to us and we try to work with ECHO and get them on the program down there in order to keep them going and have their medication going forward.
Okay. And sometimes you provide rent money for people?
We pay a portion of their rent. For instance, one person, it's $170. We're very limited on our funding, so it is a case-by-case basis.
Well, how do you decide if somebody comes in and they say they're being evicted? I mean, what kind of criteria do you have to decide whether or not they should receive assistance?
If they've never worked, you know, they need to be out. If they're not on disability, they need to go do job referrals. If somebody comes in and they've just lost their job and they're, you know, a little bit shy of having their rent and they've already found another job, we're more apt to help them and call other agencies and things, versus somebody that's 4 months behind on rent and needs to find a place right now to move into because there's no stopping the eviction. We cannot pay $2,000 on somebody's rent. We have a very large township that we have to make the money go as far as we can.
You also help with burials in unusual situations. What kind of situations would that be?
A lot of times we'll have people whose family members will be willing to come in and sign if they don't have, but the person didn't have the resources to be buried. We've had several instances where their loved ones have come in, signed the paper, and will tell us, no, we're not going to go to the services. And that's when I'll go. I don't ever believe that somebody should ever end their time here without somebody recognizing that they existed. And so I'll go stand with the people at the funeral home and kind of just hang out until it's done. You know, a lot of times nobody will show up.
I guess the problem is the funeral homes, obviously they want to be paid, just like any other business, they want to be paid, and so they call, somebody calls the funeral home about a sudden death, and they say, do you have some money up front? And they don't have any, and they call and call and call, and so finally it's up to you guys to make sure a body is taken care of.
Right. And we have very good working relationships with all the funeral homes, and so they know usually within, I don't know, probably the first couple of hours of talking to a family over the phone before they even walk in, whether or not they'll be able to come to our office. There's a lot of times, too, we work very close with the Vanderburgh County Coroner's Office when they have families come in there that don't know how they're going to bury their loved ones, and they'll refer them to us.
Now, once a person is buried, can they go to you to help pay the bill?
No, we cannot. After the services are complete, we cannot, we can't help. So it's very important for people to come to us prior to making any of their arrangements.
It almost seems like with regard to the burials, the trustee's office, it's almost, for lack of a better word, a sanitation type of issue.
Oh, don't say that.
Well, I mean, as well as just the dignity, but I mean,
right.
You have to do something with the body. I mean,
right. Yeah. The dignity thing kind of sticks with me versus
yeah.
the sanitation thing.
No, but I mean, it is. It simply is.
We just want to make sure that the families and the family members are taken care of. You know, I've been there. I've been in a position to where I've had to worry about how to bury my loved one. Not for me, it wasn't because I didn't have the money, it was because I didn't know the process. And a lot of times we'll get family members that will come in that just don't know the process. They may not qualify, but they come in and ask questions. And, you know, it's not always about us being able to hand out money or you know, pay somebody's bill. Sometimes it's just about guiding them.
You also provide transportation sometimes for people so they can get medical care, is that right? There
have been times where we've had people that have to travel to Indianapolis and things, and we're able to work with other agencies as well as the Knight Township Trustee's Office to provide a little bit of money to go and travel to get that care.
It sounds like the goal of your office is more like, say, a short-term kind of a thing. Is
right.
Somebody is confronted with some kind of a sudden emergency. I mean, they're suddenly ill, their house is burned down, it's flooded, and they have nothing. But the goal is to either get them back to work mm-hmm. or get them signed up for Medicaid or something like that, but not to be drawn off the township trustee.
Right.
You're kind of an emergency
If we're doing our job right, and I tend to think I have the best case managers there ever were, we work really hard at seeing people through whatever the problem is right then. We work really, really hard to make sure that they don't just come in, that we walk with them and guide them to the next step of the process. If it's moving, then here's a list of agencies and places that, you know, have Section 8 housing. If you are sick and you can't get your health insurance, let's sit down and we'll go through the application process with you. I mean, that part of it isn't really the job, it's just being human and kind. And knowing that if you were in that position, wouldn't you want somebody to walk that road with you?
So a lot of times it's making the phone calls. Mm-hmm. These people don't even know who to call.
Right. Sometimes they just need somebody to guide or listen to them and kind of get that in order of where they need to go next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in our office we get calls like that. It's kind of the same thing. People just don't even know where to start. Mm-hmm. They just don't know where to start. And the Civic Center is really intimidating to people. I mean, you got the security guards, and it's a big building, and they go down there and they kind of freak out. They don't
right.
know where to go or anything.
Right. That's probably one of the best things about our job is that we have the opportunity to sit down with people and really find out what's going on in their lives and how we can help them. A lot of times we have people that come in that just lost their job and they're worried about losing their home. Well, they don't even have a disconnect notice yet, so we can't necessarily help them right then, but we can give them all of the agency listings and you know, the staffing resources to help them find a job. We keep up to date on everybody that's hiring and make sure that we pass out that information to people.
Mm-hmm. There was some talk about having drug testing for people that can get any kind of aid. It sounds like so much of your office is instant problems, like somebody's out of insulin, they need insulin right now.
Right.
are, like you say, their utilities are being shut off and it's 20 degrees and they've got small children in the house, that sort of thing. Would, if there was a state law that requires you guys to do drug testing, would that affect you very much or not much at all? Or?
I mean, we are very, very thorough in our paperwork. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't, you know, when somebody's wasting money because of the information we require. So instead of assisting somebody with $50 on their utility bill, we're going to spend $50 on a drug test and then maybe $50 on their utility bill. I don't see a lot of that abuse in my office. I did when I first took over. When I first was in that office, I saw a lot of people that were coming back month after month and receiving thousands of dollars a year in assistance, and that's not what the township's designed for. If we do our jobs and do them well, we can determine whether or not there's wasted resources, and we can deny people based on that.
So what happened when you first got in there? You had to kind of lay the word out on people, more or less?
We had to explain that there's rules and guidelines, and due to budget cuts, and basically just the fact that what's right is right, and it's not right to continue to pay somebody's bills when people are coming in just losing their jobs after working and needing just 1 month's worth of help.
Let's talk about some specific cases you've had to deal with since you became the trustee. You told me about a grandmother that had a 3-year-old child, died of cancer, and didn't have any way to bury the kid.
Right. That was after I left the Civic Center when I first took office. One of the very first clients that I had, and I think the first burial that I had, and after going down to the Civic Center, I was told that I needed to go back to my office and shut the doors. And as I walked in, the grandmother was talking to one of the caseworkers, and she just turned around, stood up, and hugged me and said, "Thank you for burying her granddaughter." And at that moment, I knew that closing the doors wasn't an option. You just don't do that to people. And I mean, that scenario stuck with me all of this time and reminds me every day why I'm there.
You also told me about a family that you found that had a 9-month-old baby, and the family was sleeping in Price Park.
Right. They came to us one morning after a sheriff's deputy had spoke to them, and it took about 3 months for us to walk the path with them. It was a lot of faxing paperwork and trying to get them into transitional housing, and but initially it was calling some people that we knew at some churches and getting the funds to put them in a temporary home until we could get them into a transitional shelter. And then we finally, they had jobs, secured child care for their daughter, and eventually have their own place.
So you work with a lot of homeless shelters and the Albion Fellows Bacon Center and all those kinds of things.
Right. We work very closely with a lot of the agencies, and we are very lucky to live in Evansville with all of the resources and the agencies that we have available to people in need. You never know when it's going to be you, when it's going to be you standing on the other side of the door at Knight Township Trustee Office, or you standing on the other side of the door at the Salvation Army. You know, I try to remind people of that don't always agree with the townships or that, you know, what we do or any kind of assistance. You know, you never know when it could be you.
Where's the money for the township come from? Property
taxes. We also, well, I'm sure we'll get to the business property tax soon. But we collect the tax revenue. If you go on the assessor's page, you can look up exactly what you pay on your property towards your township. And most people, it's on average $5 to $10 a year.
Yeah, it's a small percent of your tax, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the township trustee is also in charge of cemetery maintenance, and as I understand, you do have one cemetery in your township.
We do. We have the James Cemetery on South Green River Road, and I'll tell you, it's really neat to walk around and just look at the history and you know, the last names that you see that are still prominent in Evansville, and kind of, you know, just see the history.
And the township trustee's in charge with keeping the weeds mowed and the
Right.
cemetery maintained.
Yeah, we keep it up and make sure that there's no vandalism or anything like that.
In some of the efforts to reorganize government, they've talked about abolishing the trustee's office.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
I agree to a certain extent that it needs to be fixed. I definitely don't believe that it needs to be abolished. I think that what we do is very important, not only for the community as a whole, but for neighborhoods. And it's amazing to me how many landlords we work with on a daily basis that, you know, see the need for township government. Like any other form of government, we see the misuse of funds and not so honest people, but I think completely doing away with it isn't the answer.
You said there's some things that need to be fixed, like what?
The oversight. I think that, you know, we really don't have, we answer to our board with the annual reports, and my board comes in once a month and checks the books and signs off that they've looked at them. But that's not a policy that every township uses. It needs to be across the board with all of them. The audits, you know, it's 4 years. We just had our audit this past March at the beginning of this year, and that's based on the request that I made, because when you become trustee or any other elected official, you don't really have, you know, a person training you. You have to read everything, and I wanted to have the auditor come in and make sure that we were filing the right paperwork and that we were filling it out correctly. And so I think that needs to be mandating. You don't come back 4 years after you've done an audit in a township that's lost so much money. You know, I could have been
4 years can be a long time.
I could have been another one,
Yeah.
you know, and came in, and where would the township be? And the state should be held accountable for that.
We're almost out of time. Let me ask you, this has been a kind of rough 4 years. I mean, you inherited a mess. You're running for re-election. Just look the voters in the eye and just say, why should they elect you again?
I said in the beginning that I would prove that I was worthy of this job. I love my job. I love getting up and going to work every day and meeting my neighbors and the people that are in need. I would like to continue to be your Knight Township trustee, and I would appreciate your vote.
Kathryn, I really appreciate your time. It's been good talking to you.
Thank you.
I hope you'll join us for next week. We're going to have her opponent, the Republican candidate for Knight Township trustee, Mr. Billy Garrett. Thank you very much. We'll see you then.
This year in the Tri-State, 1 out of 8 people will be in an accident.
Would you know what to do?
Call Woods & Woods. They'll get you help.
When you call Woods & Woods, you are not a statistic. You are our client, and we will fight to get the money you deserve.
And that's what Mike did. He really fought hard for me. They just really cared.
If you've been injured, call 1-800-544-2108.
Let Woods and Woods work for you. You don't owe us a dime unless we win your case.
You're watching memorable entertainment television. MeTV Tri-State.